Welcome to Security Boulevard, the cybersecurity podcast from the Future Group. Each episode explores a variety of topics within cybersecurity and the technologies that drive it. You can find us on securityboulevard.com, the Security Boulevard YouTube channel, Techstrong TV, and all of your favorite podcast platforms. Let's jump into today's episode by meeting our hosts. Joining me as always, Mr. Mitch Ashley. Mitch, it's good to see you. Happy February.
Hey, happy February, everybody. Mitch Ashley. I'm with Futurum also, and I lead the software lifecycle engineering practice, software security, all kinds of good stuff. So good to be here, as always, Tom.
And joining us today is a friend of mine, a very special co-host, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Bloody hell, I'm not so good at introducing. So I'm Zoe Rose. I have a very long title. You can look on LinkedIn because I'm not going to say the alphabet soup out. But essentially, I manage security operations for Canon EMEA.
And my name is Tom Hollingsworth. I am the event lead for all things related to security at Tech Field Day, which is a part of the Futurum Group. So let's jump into today's episode. One of the things that has created some consternation with people is this idea of digital sovereignty and who owns your data. And the answer, unfortunately, sometimes is it depends, because it really depends on where your data is housed, where your company's headquarters are located, and a bunch of other factors. And one of the things that brought this up, because I wanted to talk about it, was a news story that I saw a couple weeks ago that the FBI in the US asked Microsoft for the encryption keys for some encrypted data that was being stored on their Azure services. And Microsoft's response was, sure thing, guys, and sent over those encryption keys so that that data could be decrypted for an investigation. And for some people in the US, I'm sure that the answer is, well, yeah, that's what the FBI does. And for some people overseas in Europe, maybe Germany, the answer is, was? No! I don't even know if that was the right article, but we'll go with it. That, to me, that is kind of the highlight of what we're dealing with here is when things were different and like there was literal physical papers stored everywhere, the sovereignty of those papers was very interesting to figure out, because like if they're stored in an embassy vault, that embassy vault is the sovereign territory of that country and you can't go in and get those. It doesn't matter if you have a warrant or some kind of permission to do that. But now that they're being stored in the cloud, is that cloud owned by the company that owns the cloud? Is it owned by the organization whose data center space they're renting? And it just so happens that one of our guests today is a non-US resident. So we're going to get some really interesting perspectives on this. So I want to open the floor up to the both of you. How do we deal with these sticky situations? Because what if the organization that was storing that data in Microsoft Azure was a non-US entity? Are they bound by the rules of Microsoft in Washington? Are they bound by the US? Are they bound by their home country? How do we sort this out?
So your guest, go right ahead. First serve.
I'm just going to clarify, I'm not a data privacy expert. So I am making it up as I go along, basically. but the comment, it depends, is so key here because there's a lot of difficulties when it comes to the US. And I'm not trying to be political or anything. I mean, in the sense of the US has a rule. It's like I don't know what it's called, but I should have probably Googled it before I came on. But it's if the organization, from my understanding, again, making it up as I go along, from my understanding, if the organization where the data is the organization itself, if it's headquartered in America, it doesn't matter where it's stored. So if you are a US company, but you have a EU-based branch, the data is still considered US. And so therefore, the US government could still request access to it. I think if you're a US citizen, maybe there's differences there as well. I don't really know that one. And then when it comes to hosting, well, we already see from the Microsoft one, I would not put my bet in the case that if there's any American touch, that it wouldn't necessarily fall under fire with, and I'm not trying to imply anything there, but it would not necessarily fall to the point where it wouldn't be shared. So I make the assumption, we all know what assumptions are, but anyway, I would make the assumption that if I have a connection to the US in any matter, that there is the impact that potentially a government could request it. I do know, working in Canada, I know I don't sound Canadian, but many years ago, I worked in Canada, and we would get requests from law enforcement in the US for certain types of data. One of my clients was an ISP, and we would get requests quite continuously from the US, which we didn't at the time have to comply with for some reason. But with that Microsoft one, clearly, I don't know if they had to comply or if they just wanted to.
I may be confusing different situations, but I think this Microsoft one was they didn't even have a court order to ask for it. They just asked for it, and Microsoft gave it up. If I'm inaccurate about that, I apologize. But I think that was another layer on top of this. Is there wasn't even a force, behind asking for it. Just we asked for it. With data sovereignty, it brings up all these issues about, well, what about data residency? Where does the data live? If it's in the cloud or if it's not in the cloud? And then accessing it, does that constitute a transfer of that data, even though it's still living over there in whatever sovereign environment? And I think if we aren't there already, I think we're in for pretty much a patchwork of regulations of who says what. Brazil says this, Argentina says that, China says this, US, Europe, EU. EU tends to have one set of regulations for the most part. But I think that's the confusing factor here is, can the average IT network security admin engineer figure out this? It's not as simple as GDPR, not saying GDPR is simple.
No, but I think what's worth highlighting is I'm not a data privacy expert. I am a security expert. Debatable, but I'm considered one. But I have data privacy team members and data privacy officers and data privacy champions that I go to and say, here's what I want. Does this meet our requirement? We have policies, we have processes, we have structure around deciding, will this work for us? We have agreements, we have MSAs, we have contracts. All of this in deciding, is this solution or this solution the better route? And sometimes it comes down to where it's hosted and where it's stored, because data privacy is just as important as security. I mean, okay, well, if I'm a security person, maybe I shouldn't say that, but it is very, very important, ultimately, because I can patch it and keep it as secure as I want, but if unknown people are accessing it for their own reasons, I've got a security incident.
So let me throw a little monkey wrench into this problem, because this is another one of those blurred lines things. The data that I'm talking about in this particular story was stored on 3 laptops. So it was completely offline. What happened was, if you've ever encrypted anything in BitLocker, which is Microsoft's version of full disk encryption, one of the things that Microsoft encourages you to do is to upload those BitLocker keys to Microsoft. So in the event that you forget the BitLocker key or you get locked out or something like that, you can call Microsoft, provide information, and they'll decrypt the information for you. In your head, that's a great idea, right? What happens if I forget the password to my laptop and I'm locked out of it? But then the flip side of that is, if there's a court order to get that information because you won't provide it for whatever reason, they can go around you and decrypt the files off of those laptops.
And if I remember correctly, it wasn't just, in this case, maybe it was 3 laptops, but it wasn't just if you're end user or a personal person in your personal life uploading cloud. It's also the structure of if you're at a corporate environment and they get you to store it so that it can be restored. So it's a broader impact than just personal devices.
Because one of the other things that BitLocker allows you to do is upload your encryption key to Active Directory, and an Active Directory admin can decrypt it. So it could be that if you're storing data on a corporate laptop, the law enforcement officers can request your BitLocker key from your administrator. You might not even know that your encryption key has been produced, because there's no way that you would know that. And then that gets into all these messy things of, well, were you using the laptop for anything personal? Was it all professional? What kind of liability is the business being opened up to if you're doing illegal things on a company-owned asset?
Well, it also goes down to, it's not just company-owned. So if you're doing company work on a personal phone, like if you've got your work phone and your work phone and your mobile phone, your personal phone, but you're doing work activities on your work phone and your personal phone, they could then access both of those, couldn't they? Like it's very complex.
Well, and I think this is where, there's the Cloud Act that U.S. put in place. It involves
That's
FISA.
what I was
And you have
trying
to
to talk
go,
about. Yeah.
yeah, you have to go through the FISA courts supposedly to get access to it. But there's, of course, I think the data privacy falls under GDPR. Maybe as part of the AI Act. Everything is AI these days, so that may change things as well. But accessing this information, we're talking about people accessing it. Most times could be applications, but now we're talking about agents and AI, of course, not to turn this into the AI security podcast, but that could very much change things of where things operate and where they're allowed to operate. And is there a sovereign agent that can access sovereign data?
What if that sovereign agent can go find the encryption keys that were stored on an unencrypted drive? Or
what if it's a double agent? What if it's a double
Well,
what if
agent?
If we go to the Verizon data breach every year, the report that they make, one of the top categories is not highly sophisticated attackers, it's misconfiguration. So not only, if you're bringing in AI, what if you accidentally give access to things you're not supposed to, which I imagine that's happening all the time, that we don't even realize.
Can you say MoltBot, the new
It's not
Cloud
MoltBot anymore. It's changed. It's OpenClaw now because
it's
again,
OpenClaw. Oh boy,
Yeah,
I missed it this weekend.
Yeah, if anybody's been keeping track of this, you're going to listen to two back-to-back episodes of the podcast, and that tool changed its name 3 times in the time that those 2 episodes were recorded. But that kind of comes back to that whole, what am I dumping from these devices without realizing that I've opened up these permissions? Because in the case of CloudBot, MoltBot, OpenCloud, whatever we're calling it this week, you give it access to be able to read your chats, whether it's Slack or iMessage or anything like that. And iMessage is actually a really interesting kind of pivot point here, because this is something that was brought up in the discussion about what happened with these 3 Guam laptops. Apple has their own version of disk encryption software, File Vault. They can't recover a File Vault. Like it is specifically designed. iMessage, File Vault, all of their systems are so designed so that they can't get into it. And we've seen this time and again, because people have asked Apple to open up someone's encrypted end-to-end iMessages to be able to do whatever. And Apple says, no, we can't do it. And when a company even suggests that they're going to sue Apple to do it, then Apple meets them in court. And in one particular case with something that happened in the US several years ago with an iPhone 5C, the government quietly dropped their request to have Apple decrypt the iMessage, and Apple immediately turned around and sued the government to find out how they were able to get in. And that's how we learned about things like gray boxes and stuff like that. So the question, this is something that Senator Ron Wyden from the US brought up, is if Apple, and he mentioned Meta as well, if they can encrypt things end to end with no visibility into what the people are talking about, how come other companies either can't or won't do that? Because to me, using a program, say like Signal, which is not only encrypted end to end, but the Signal people can't even get into it if something were to happen, I would rather have that than, oh, I guess I forgot my key. Oh, that could be bad for me. No, what's bad for me is when someone with access chooses to abuse that access because they can.
I am a security person. I am not comfortable with an organization choosing who has rights to my data. And if you attack me for saying, oh, you shouldn't be worried because you have nothing to hide, I do have something to hide because I'm a person and I have a right to my privacy. Everyone has a right to their privacy. I, however, am a technical person. I know how to do things to the best of my ability. I make mistakes, but I learn from them. I've taken things offline. I've learned from it. I'm not the average user. So I think there's both sides to the argument. I'm going to say it depends again, because from a Microsoft perspective, they are designed for the enterprise. They're designed to ensure availability. They want, if a user locks themselves out, if a company has issues, they're designed to try and give that data back. I get why they set it up that way. From a Signal perspective, yeah, they design it so that nobody could take it over. That's the whole point of them, right? If you remember a couple of years ago when we had the Security Field Day, and Keeper Security, the password manager, was presenting on their zero knowledge concept of, if you can't access, well, we can't help you because we don't have access. There's no way for us to decrypt it. That is the goal. That is the design of the product. I get why this whole Microsoft situation happens, but I think that organizations and end users and, both the professional and personal have a right to understand what the impact is. And years ago, I had a colleague who's a privacy lawyer, and she worked hard with an organization to rewrite terms and conditions on social media platforms so that children could understand it. I think, in my perspective, is organizations should have the responsibility to be extremely clear. Here is the privacy impact of your data. Because yes, we say yes or no to cookies. Yes, we say yes or no to marketing companies. But where in there does it say, do you realize if you do this, I could give your data to somebody else that you would have no idea I do? I feel like that responsibility should exist.
Or that's buried on page 23 of the EULA that you clicked on.
Yeah. That it shouldn't be buried. It should be clear. It should be transparent. I live in the EU, so I'm very pro data privacy. I do know a lot of organizations are not as much that way.
It's the plain language.
Sorry, go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to say, it's a plain language problem that we've run into with IT for years, right? In IT, we know how to describe something and understand what it does. In security, in the same way. But normal people don't understand that. Think of all of the prompts, the system prompts that you get now on your mobile device when an app needs permissions. This app can read your email. Well, I don't know that I want it to read my email. Well, if you want it to be able to categorize your email, it has to be able to read it, right? Or this app needs access to Bluetooth devices. Well, I don't want it to do that until you want to stream something to your TV.
Or use headphones.
Right. And that's the thing. Some of the most successful apps at this say in very clear language, we need to access your phone records because we need to know this, or we need to understand that, and we'll never use it for these things. And, that kind of thing. The more clear they are, the better off we all feel about it. But I feel like in some cases, the organizations that want access to be able to get into these systems, they want to be purposefully obfuscating it. Like, oh, well, we just need to be able to get into people's iMessages at some point in the future, maybe for reasons, but we're not going to tell you why, because that would be wrong.
But it also has the reality of, the comment I made earlier, I have nothing to hide, therefore I shouldn't be concerned. Well, okay, but maybe I don't have an issue with Tom accessing my email. I don't have an issue handing Tom my phone because I trust Tom. However, if Tom is replaced with somebody else, I'm going to pick on you because you're the only other one here. If he's replaced with Mitch, I'm not okay with that. I'm not giving Mitch my phone.
I wouldn't give me your phone if I was you. No. Well,
but when things change as well, I mean,
you're talking about that circle of trust, right, Zoe? And I can't speak to Signal in their process, and I'm not saying Apple does everything right. I can criticize Apple all I want, but even Apple has recovery or reset mechanisms that aren't just. It isn't a one-shot key, and if you don't have that key, you're out, right? But it's part of an ecosystem of your identity, and like you were talking about, Tom, you have to validate on a separate device. Yeah, that's me. I'm allowed. Okay, there's a number there I have to type in from that app. I may have to do another authorization through authentication app with a code, those kinds of things. I went through that procedure not too long ago to recover a password on a machine. I didn't know what it was anymore from way back. But that was, Apple couldn't do that for me. I had to do it, but they gave me the instructions to do it. It seems like that's whether you're an enterprise or an individual, Zoe, to your point about, they have different interests, even the enterprise should be able to recover those accounts. Let's say when you left and you didn't have the right key loaded up into Active Directory, now the company has to recover it. There are should be mechanisms to do that when it's company-owned data as well as when it's personal-owned.
I can actually speak to this because I can't remember if it was the phone that I have now or the phone that I had previously. I had a bit of an issue with it. So for everyone who knows, Google basically, you can have permissions attached to a Google account, right? So the Google account that I use in my daily life also has permissions to be able to post videos on the Tech Field Day YouTube channel. It's a thing. Well, when I switched phones, I needed to log into that account. And in order to do that, the way that Google works now is if you have another device that's logged into a Google account, you can send a 2-factor code to it, right? Apple works the same way. but the devices that it was wanting me to send those codes to didn't exist anymore. Like 2 of the 3 of them didn't, and the third one was my old phone. And try as I might, I couldn't get it to do a password reset. I couldn't get it to do like text me a code because it would pop up and say, a more secure method exists. I actually ended up having to boot up my old phone and pull the thing off it, which is why, kids, you should never erase your device until you know that every app works. But in my frustration of this, right, because it was like an hour process of me trying and failing so many ways, I'm like, oh my God, how come this isn't easier? And then a little in the back of my head, something said, because it shouldn't be this easy for someone that's not you to be able to get into your device. And that, I think, is the thing. Kind of to Zoe's point, the whole, well, if you don't have anything to hide, why won't you let us look? Okay, cool. Every executive board member at the company now has all of their emails open for everybody to read. Are you horrified by that idea? You're a publicly traded company. Everything on your device should be available to read because you're in the public interest. Do you see now how that presumption of guilt, if you don't let me look at things, causes problems? What if now, instead of it me being a shareholder, what if it's a government entity? Because you know what happens when someone announces that a government entity is investigating a company? Share price goes down, even if there's nothing wrong. And kind of circling back to our original comment, Zoe, to your point, if your company is headquartered in the US, then there's the presumption that the FBI has jurisdiction to get your data. But if that data is stored in the UK, and if you're doing business with, or not UK, but if let's say France, if your data is stored in France and you're doing business with French customers, GDPR supersedes everything. And we know that because we've seen people get fined for it. And I remember when GDPR rolled out and I had to attest that I wasn't doing business with companies there in order to prevent me from having to deal with all this GDPR stuff. And that's the thing, is like, what ultimate superseding regulation works? Like, this isn't like The Martian where it's like, according to the law of the ocean, I'm a pirate kind of thing, and this is my ship now. This is trying to find the loophole that lets you get out of this scot-free, because inevitably someone at some point, whether it's the U.S. Supreme Court or, I don't know, the ICC or the EU's equivalent of the Supreme Court, is going to come back and go, actually, no, that was illegal, and now you can't use any of that in your court case.
Interesting analogy is I'm a data pirate and I salvaged data found, in the open that nobody had anymore. Now that's mine. I own that. But to your example, Tom, is there's a difference between, I have a court order, I'm looking for this data, right? So usually that request comes from, send all this data that you have, and corporations are
send all this data
oversubscribed.
That related to this specific thing. That is an important thing that we have to note. A warrant is not a fishing expedition, and I'm talking about a judicial warrant.
That's my point.
I also want to add, I have seen some of these, and I have seen some that have given way broader access than they should, because the person that signed off didn't know what they were signing off for.
And this judges have this problem, but when you get into like younger judges that are technically savvy, they're usually like, you were only allowed to look for text messages on this specific dates between these people related to this item. And you cannot use anything you find to charge additional crimes, because that's fruit of the poison tree. Yes, I watch Law and Order. But continue your point, Mitch. I just want to make sure that everybody at home understands, warrants are not fishing expeditions.
Right. Well, now I think the one sort of get out of jail free card, if that's a good analogy, is FISA court national security. That tends to be very broad, at least from the things I've seen, because once you put that label on it, they want to be able to go lots of places. Now, maybe judges restrict that more, but that seems to be the concern. If you can make everything a national security issue, I can go fishing all I want.
Yeah, and not only that, but usually if it goes NatSec, like, it's classified at that point, so you're not even allowed to notify the target or any of them related to them. And that's one of the things that we've run into in the past, is that people were like, with a FISA court warrant, they could have their phones wiretapped and they would never know, because you're not allowed to notify the target or anyone related to them. And it's only years later that it comes out. You're like, wait a minute, how long have you been collecting the phone records from me? Like, and for anybody that's old enough to remember, like, we had this problem back in the 70s, right? When they were trying to bust the 5 families in New York City. It's like, we're just going to wiretap every phone they own. And we're going to collect all this data. And we're just looking for stuff. If you ever wanted to know why gangsters talk in code in the movies, That's why, is because they always assumed that someone was listening to their conversations and they had to make it sound like this was a thing that was happening that really wasn't. And now what do we have? We have people that can go in and dump your entire email account and just, Control F and look for a word or look for a code word. And, oh, look what I found here. And that to me is the ultimate problem that we deal with digital sovereignty, is that if you have the ability to decrypt data at rest by requesting file vault keys or BitLocker keys or whatever, you effectively have created a time bomb, because all I have to do is get a hold of your data, decrypt it, pass it through any kind of a filtering system, and just go fishing.
And also, I got security because I don't trust people. I had to learn to like people. I'm not even kidding. I had to learn to like people, and I had to learn to trust people. Ultimately, I still don't. To a point, I trust Tom. I trust you. You're loud, but unless you call me randomly and you appear slightly random, then I would suspect you're AI. But regardless, I don't trust people. Ultimately, I don't trust organizations. I am just a number to any of them. I know that. I am not a fancy, important person. So ultimately, when I choose a product that I use, I know that eventually it could theoretically be used against me, which is why I go for the products that prioritize my privacy and my control. In a corporate environment, I don't have, I'm an exception. I work in security, so I get to design that. As an end user, I might not have that authority, but in my personal life, I should theoretically. So ultimately, we are dependent on organizations designing things in a secure way, like Keeper with a zero knowledge, like Apple, where they don't want or don't have the ability to decrypt. I'm not saying those companies are perfect at all. I am saying, though, that when I look for products, I look at ones that have the same mindset as me to a point, obviously. And when I look at data privacy, in my unexpert opinion on there, I do look at minimizing where the conflicts can come up. So if I'm hosting data somewhere, my priority is going to be Germany or the EU. It's not going to be America. No offense, Tom, but it's not going to be there. I am going to prioritize the EU because of our privacy regulations.
I just say, if you design your systems to meet Germany's privacy laws and their security regulations, you're going to be good everywhere else in the world.
And that's what organizations do. Typically, we say, for example, my organization is Europe-wide. It's EMEA, right? It's more Europe, but it's very, very big. We have a lot of different privacy regulations, a lot of different regulations in general, a lot of rules. And so we design for the most strict. I imagine in America or the US, they do similar because you have state changes and weird things there. So I imagine you also design for the most stringent.
We kind of have the federal and then California. There's like two tiers.
Pretty much.
Fair enough.
That tends to be the
well, that's more than one.
factors. Yeah, there is more than one. Everything else is kind of random from that point on, but to your point.
So I think we kind of hit a wrapping point here when we talk about the challenges that are faced with the digital sovereignty kind of in general. Is you've got to Zoe's point, I don't trust people, but I trust an individual person when they've proven themselves trustworthy. And corporations are nothing but collections of people. And so what we have to do is we have to decide, am I willing to put my faith in a system of people that I don't know? Or would I feel more comfortable knowing that there are technological barriers in place to prevent those people from becoming a person that I don't trust? And for me, kind of like Zoe said, I would rather trust people who have shown that they are willing to put the best interests of an unknown user ahead of their own financial or, in some cases, legal challenges. And I'm going to continue to use those companies. I'm going to continue to purchase products from organizations that feel like they have privacy at heart. I'm going to continue to donate to projects that are increasing the overall security of people. And I'm going to choose not to use products that have shown that they would rather make a quick buck off of me and, I'll sell your information. I don't care. I want to thank both of you for joining us this week, because this has been a great discussion. Mitch, I know that you're a super busy man with all the stuff going on with the Futurum Group. What have you got going on that people should be checking out?
Well, the newest thing on my project list is to get to spend a little more time with Zoe, so she'll start to trust me. But besides that, which is an important thing, besides that, we just launched a new data set for around software delivery, software development, also including using AI, but also not using AI. Really comprehensive data, and so I'm doing a lot of things with that and writing reports. Getting pieces of that out there that I think are the most meaningful around, like, for example, and probably not surprise to everyone, but 97% of organizations are either using AI for software development or evaluating. I think it's only 20% were evaluating. It's like 3.1% haven't gotten AI religion yet. It's happened that fast. And at the beginning of last year, it was in the 40% range. That's how fast we've adopted this. Whether it's secure or not, that probably makes all of us cringe from a security standpoint. And also gearing up for conference season. There's a number of conferences coming up that'll be out, but I'll have a post on LinkedIn just to follow me at, so you can see what things I'm producing and where I'll be in. I love to meet and see everybody.
Awesome. And Zoe, I know that you have some amazing stuff that people should check out. Where can people go to learn more about some of the things that are of interest to you?
At the moment, probably my website, rosesec.com, or on LinkedIn. I'm also on Blue Sky. I have removed my X accounts for various reasons, but those are my two or three. I said three things. Those are my three most active. But yeah, right now, conferences and being a mum is my main focus.
I had I was getting flashbacks to the Spanish Inquisition sketch. Our primary weapon is fear. Our primary weapons are three primary weapons, but that's how it is. And of course, the Spanish Inquisition, they were security people because you didn't expect them to show up. As for me, we have a lot of great stuff going on. As we're recording this, we just finished AI Infrastructure Field Day, and we've got Cloud Field Day coming up with Alistair Cook. I'm going to be on the road at RSAC this year, doing Tech Field Day Extra. We've got some great companies that are signed up. If you want to check out techfieldday.com for more information on that, we invite you to do so. But we also want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Security Boulevard Podcast. If you enjoyed this conversation, do us a favor and make sure that you're subscribed on YouTube. And maybe even subscribe to us in your favorite podcast application of choice if you want to listen to us while you're on the road or the train or wherever you do your podcast listening. If you want to leave us a rating, a review, and possibly even a comment on our video, we would love that, because that really does help the show grow and get out to new audiences. Of course, we're brought to you by securityboulevard.com and the Futurum Group. If you want to check out our show notes, but also our archive of past episodes, you can go to securityboulevard.com for that. You can also go to the TechStrong TV website or download that TechStrong TV app. That's usable on Apple TV, Roku, your smart TV, your tablet. If anybody can get it running on one of those calendar things that everybody seems to put in their kitchen now, I want screenshots of that. Make sure that you're following Security Boulevard across all of the socials, whether it's Blue Sky, X, Twitter, LinkedIn. Just look for Security BLVD, because most of the time there's a username limit, but we want to check you out, and we'd love for you to follow us. Thanks so very much for tuning in, and we'll see you all for next week's episode.